It's the first full day of summer, and, well, summer around here can be a little strange at times, I guess. Ben's out of school finally. Here's the really dumb thing. Last Friday was supposed to be his last day of school for the year, but because there had been a snow day during the school year, they decided to extend the school year by one day, which meant, of course, that because Monday was a federal holiday, it would have to be Tuesday, and it was going to be a half a day. So Ben, who has spent the entire year telling me how much he hates school, he doesn't want to go to school, I don't like school, I don't want to go to school, I said to him last week, you don't have to go on Tuesday. We're not going to make you go on that Tuesday. It's stupid. It's a half day. It's pointless. He said, I want to go. Presumably because they weren't going to do nothing. Anyway, Monday night rolled around and he's like, no, I don't want to go. Almost in tears. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Okay, you don't have to go. I'm not going to make you go. So summertime has reached us, and there you go. I am feeling very much under the weather. My voice is still not there. I don't know. Starting to wonder if it's ever going to come back. We're noticing that we have a lot of side effects after COVID that are causing me some concern. One of which is I have, this is gross, but I have a huge phlegm problem that you can hear in my throat. It's just driving me nuts. I go through about a bag of Ricolas a day. You can't even see that on there because it's the wrong color. But I go through about a bag of Ricola a day just trying to keep myself from hacking my lungs up, trying to clear my throat. Anyway, I'm not feeling 100% today, but I felt like it's been a while because of the holiday and everything else, and because of Rod is still, for those of you who don't know, Rod is still on voice rest, mandatory voice rest. He can't talk. So that's why we're not doing What the Frock right now. So I was kind of sitting here thinking to myself, well, what can I talk about today that matters, I guess? And the reality is that there's a lot of stuff happening in the world today, and you know this, I know this. And it seems like the stuff that's being portrayed as important isn't, and the stuff being portrayed as unimportant is. We're watching what's going on in Texas and Uvalde, and I have a lot of thoughts on that. Too many for this show. Too many for not sitting down with a cogent outline of what I want to say, because there are things about Uvalde that bother me. But the biggest one that bothers me is I don't know that we've ever seen more clearly portrayed the fundamental difference between service and employment. I've said for years, look, we have a problem with the way we do policing, the way we use police in this country. I'm not saying police officers. I'm saying the concept of policing is flawed badly in this country. And one of the areas in which it is flawed is it is presented to us as service to our community, to serve and protect. Almost every cop car in the country says that in some form or another on it. Every police department says that. Public safety. And yet, every 2 to 3 years, we're subjected to these negotiations with police unions for how much more, and fire unions, for how much more money we need, because this is a dangerous job. And yet when the moment comes for service, more often than not, it seems, we get employment, not service. I have said for years that if it's really about service, if it's really, truly, honestly about service, then police should make the same as the military. But usually when I say that, I get yelled at. So I'll leave that for another day. Yesterday, the Supreme Court of the United States issued a bunch of rulings. None of them were the ones that people are salivating over. None of them are the ones that people are irate about. But there were some interesting cases that were decided in a 6-3 decision. The Supreme Court of the United States decided that Maine, the state of Maine, had a rule that excluded religious schools from a state tuition program. Now, the problem in Maine is that Maine is it's a bigger state. It's not the biggest state, but as eastern states go, it's huge. And it's also very sparsely populated, and there are not a lot of schools. And so the distance factor becomes involved here, and some parents wanted to take their state tuition value program, their vouchers, as it were, and use them to pay for private Christian schooling, for religious schooling. Shouldn't just say Christian, it was religious schooling. And Maine had a law that forbade that. And so in a 6-3 decision, which was the quote-unquote conservative bloc versus the liberal bloc, the Supreme Court ruled yesterday that that is a violation of the free exercise of religion, and that Maine cannot say to you, you cannot use your voucher, your tuition, for a private religious school. It's an interesting argument. Justice Sotomayor's dissent is scathing. She's very upset at this, as the court, quote, continues to chip away, quote unquote, at the separation of church and state. Not sure that I agree with her. As someone who vehemently supports the separation of church and state, not sure that I agree with her, and certainly not in this case. Maine is, well, it's Maine, for God's sakes. Of course, it's kind of like Wyoming and Oklahoma and other sparsely populated places as well. The question really becomes whether or not the state mandates it. In other words, you have to use it to go to the closest school, which might be a private Christian or religious school. If they did that, then that would be a problem. But in the big scheme of things, I don't know that this is all that much of a problem, but Justice Sotomayor certainly seemed to think that it was. At virtually the same moment, the court ruled 9-0. This is pretty interesting. 9-0, the court decided that the city of Boston did violate the First Amendment when it refused to let a private group raise a Christian flag in front of the city hall in Boston. And the problem, of course, was that they had already allowed other organizations, read that as religions, to do so as well, to raise their flag in some sort of celebration. But when it came to the Christian flag, they said, no. I'll be honest with you. It's always kind of bothered me that there's a Christian flag. I think that's since I was a little kid, 6 years old at the Denver Citadel Corps in Colorado. I've always thought that was a little weird. I've always thought it was weird that there was a Pledge of Allegiance to it. But at the same time, it's pretty clear that the court understood that you can't say to religion A, yes, you can raise your flag because inclusivity. And then to say to another religion, no, you cannot because we don't like your religion. In this particular case, obviously, the First Amendment was being violated, and off we go. And what I think was one of the most interesting cases yesterday, the court ruled that Texas would violate the First Amendment's protections of religious freedom if they executed a death row inmate without allowing his pastor to touch him and to pray out loud in the death chamber. The ruling was 8-1. Justice Thomas was the sole dissent. I have not had time to delve into this case. Of all the cases that were decided yesterday, this is actually the one that interests me personally the most. Not because I'm, facing a death penalty or anything, but the death penalty is something that fascinates me in this country. I've said this before. I'm not a huge fan of the way we do the death penalty. I'm not anti-death penalty. What I am is anti the way we do it. It's too expensive. It's too convoluted. It's too random not random enough. If you got money and a good attorney, you're going to get off. You're not going to get the death penalty. If you are poor, minority, you have a better chance of that. In this particular case, the inmate wanted his pastor, his religious leader, to be with him in the death chamber, to be able to hold his hand, to be able to pray out loud with him. And I personally don't see I just don't see how that's an issue. I just don't. Death is a very personal thing. Can be a very frightening thing. It's something that nobody wants to do alone. And so the idea of denying someone a religious aspect of this seems weird to me. I haven't read Thomas's dissent yet. But of all the cases that they decided yesterday, that's the one I think that interests me the most. It's the one I'll be probably going back to visit at some point. Among all the other cases and we're not going through all of them, just two more. The court decided yesterday in a 6-3 ruling, again, conservative bloc versus liberal bloc, in the National Federation of Independent Business versus Department of Labor, that the Biden administration's vaccine or testing mandate for large employers was not lawful. Now, what does that mean? You remember the 100 employee mandate? If you got 100 employees, they either have to be tested every day or they got to be vaccinated or whatever, or you have to fire them. Here we are, 2022, where I'm not sure if this is even still in effect or not. I have no idea, but it's found to be not lawful. I agree with the ruling. I'm curious to read some of the dissents in this, but I'm as to why they would descend to this, and I'm sure it's going to go back to public safety and the authority of the government, the same things that Dr. Fauci today keeps spouting. The problem is, of course, that all right, if it's not lawful, does everybody who was fired because of this, do all those employees of the Seattle, Washington State Department of Transportation, the Seattle ferry system, the firemen, the police officers, do they all get their jobs back? So far, it's been crickets from over there in Western Washington, where Jay Inslee rules continuously with full-on emergency powers. The second ruling, however, is intriguing because it goes right along with this. In Biden versus Missouri, Roberts and Kavanaugh joined the liberal bloc to rule that the requirement to mandate healthcare workers receive the vaccination was lawful if those facilities are receiving federal money. So if they're getting federal money, then the vaccine mandate for federally funded healthcare workers at facilities receiving federal money is lawful. We're fine with that. We don't have a problem with that. Now remember, we just said the 100 employee mandate is unlawful. But now we say that this one is lawful because they're receiving federal money. And of course that goes back to the main case where, if you're receiving federal money, well, is this federal government money? Is it state money? Who knows? And can you use that for a religious school or not? I don't know. What I do know is the court issued those. They did not issue the big ones that we're still waiting on. They haven't issued those yet. And consequently, we could be in for a radical week. It could be as early as Thursday. I will tell you that I have read that there are rumors that Justice Roberts, is rewriting the Dobbs decision in a compromise position, which means that it's a sharply divided 5-4 court to uphold Roe. Don't know if that's true or not. I suspect that will be the last ruling issued next week. We're still waiting on the Bremerton football coach. We're waiting on the West Virginia versus the EPA and the New York SAFE Act and those kinds of things. And those things will come over the next few days, and you will see a lot of reaction. We're still waiting on the Miranda rights case. That may be the second to last one released, because I think in the big scheme of things, that one is actually going to cause the most difficulties. The Dobbs case will cause the most reaction. Either way it goes. Either conservatives will be furious with Roberts and whoever he co-opted, probably Kavanaugh, or the other side will be furious because Roe will be overturned and it'll be back in the states issues. The bottom line is the Miranda case, Takeo versus Vega, will not get as much press immediately. But I think long term, that will be far more impactful in what's going on. That's all I got to say today, other than as you go through your day, remember there's a big difference between service and employment. And I think I'm going to have a lot more to say about that later on. I'm hesitant to talk about Uvalde for the simple reason that we don't know everything yet. Every day, literally every hour, something else comes out that changes how we perceive this. And I've watched friends of mine who have, I had a friend of mine that apologized yesterday on Twitter because she had defended the Uvalde Police Department a couple of weeks ago. We don't know all the facts, she had said. Well, now we know the facts, and I can no longer defend them. We'll see where it all goes. All right? In the meantime, we'll see you next time right here on Plausibly Live, the Dave Bowman Show podcast.